Excellent. So everyone, welcome to our annual Graduate School Application 101 panel. I think this is our 7th annual workshop that we've done in November. The panel is sponsored by the Career and Internship Center and the Writing Center. My name is Ann Glynn. I'm the director of the Writing Center here at Siena. And tonight I am co-moderating this event with my partner, Christy Lure, a career counselor from the Career and Internship Center. Christy and I are so pleased to be joined tonight by what we like to call our esteemed panel of local admissions experts. They've given graciously of their time at the height of admission season, and we're so thankful that they're willing to be here with us tonight. We have with us Soha Acosta from the University of Albany, Mariah Pelagi from the College of St. Rose, Colleen Flynn Topalia from Clarkson University, Susie Berry from Albany Medical College, and Persia Wilkins representing Albany Law School. Tonight, each panelist will provide valuable info on the application process. They've also graciously agreed after our presentation to pause to answer general questions, and after that session to move into breakout rooms. They're happy in those rooms to speak with you about their specific schools, their program offerings, their areas of expertise, and your interest in various programs. We're going to get started this evening as I share my screen. Is everyone able to see?
Yes, I can see everything.
Perfect. So we'll begin tonight with Soha Acosta, who is the Director of Graduate Recruitment and Marketing at the University of Albany. Soha handles strategic recruitment for all graduate programs regionally, nationally, and internationally. She is a strategic marketing specialist for graduate programs at SUNY Albany and also a designated school official. And she handles all international applications and credential review. Soha was previously our colleague at Siena. We're always happy to welcome her back. She also worked at SUNY Brockport, and she has extensive experience working with undergraduate, graduate, and English language international students. Tonight, Soha will speak about general application tips and financial aid. Please welcome Soha for us.
Thank you. All right, so let's start off with the application. I think a big difference between applying to undergraduate and graduate school is who is actually reading the application. So if you're applying to a professional program, so medical school, law school, dental school, many schools of public health, you will be applying to a centralized application system. So you'll submit one application, and it kind of goes out to all these different institutions. However, if you're applying to a different program, so any program that's not a professional program, your application is being read by usually faculty members on an admissions committee. And again, this varies from undergrad because probably when applying to undergrad, you either filled out the Common App or some other sort of centralized application system. You get to fill out all your information once and select which schools it would go to. So this is something very important to keep in mind throughout this presentation as everyone speaks, because you want to make sure, again, if you're not applying to a professional program, that you're tailoring your application, all your materials for the program you're applying to. So that means if you're applying to 6 different programs, 6 different institutions, you're filling out 6 different applications. You could potentially be writing 6 different personal statements, tailoring maybe letters of recommendation or your CV or resume to all those different programs. I think it's a major, once you know who your audience is, you know how to fill out the application and how to speak to them. So another big tip on just the application in general, the application piece of your biographical information, everything, is review all the application requirements and start to make a list of deadlines. I always tell students that applying to graduate school is very much a project. So start in Excel, put in the schools you're applying to, put in the deadlines, what are the requirements? Are there funding deadlines that are different than the actual program deadlines? If so, make sure you're applying by those funding deadlines. You can see some deadlines as early as November. I haven't really seen any deadlines earlier than November, but I have seen plenty of funding deadlines be in November. So make sure that's now, make sure you're being very aware of that and you're conscious of when all these deadlines are. It is possible the more competitive the school, the earlier the deadline. So keep that in mind too. Maybe if you're applying to a couple of reach schools and they're a bit more competitive, make sure you're just keeping in mind that they may have a different application deadline than some of the other schools that you are applying to. Another recommendation I have is apply as early as possible within the application period. So some institutions may have a rolling deadline. Some may not have, their deadline may not be until, for example, March. But why apply early? If they fill all their seats, say in January, that's it. You're out of luck if you missed that sweet spot of we're still taking applications and we've filled all of our seats. That happens a lot with our data science program. They filled their seats for spring, probably back in September for the spring semester. So now everyone has to move to fall. So if you can apply as early as possible with an application period, just to make sure that they've received your application, you have enough time to submit all of your documents to make it complete. And again, if they're reviewing on a rolling basis, you may get a decision earlier in that application period then, so that you have something while you're applying to other institutions. Again, familiarize yourself with all instructions before applying. I feel like applying to grad school is a test in itself of like, can you follow the prompts? Can you follow the instructions? If not, how successful are you going to be in graduate school? So just make sure you're looking at everything. So whether it's program pages, web pages, information that they've emailed you, do they want you to answer specific questions in your personal statement? Are they asking you to upload different items from another program that you're applying to? Again, if you're applying to 6 different institutions, again, not in a professional program, you're filling out 6 different applications. So you want to make sure everything is the way it should be. And if you are applying to professional programs, still follow all of those instructions. Make sure you have all the dates in mind for everything. Again, someone is going to be speaking of personal statement, make sure that that's addressing whatever it needs to address if there's anything specific. And pay attention to those details. So if they ask you to use the email addresses of your recommendations from their job, make sure you're using that, not a personal Gmail, for example. There are very small things, very small nuances that are going to vary from institution and program to program that you really want to make sure you're paying attention to. I think on the next slide, I just put in, again, these professional programs that do have some centralized application services. You'll find these if you Google pharmacy school, if you Google medical school, you're going to find some of these, but I did put some of them up, and some of my colleagues, again, from law schools and medical schools on here could speak to these more if you go into the breakout room with them, if you have any questions on those. So financial aid, money. I'm glad we put money right at the top. So there are different types of financial aid that I'm going to walk everyone through. And I'm sure I'm not going to give an exhaustive list of all the financial aid that is out there, but I do try to break it down to sort of categories and chunks for you to keep an eye out for. So the first one is need-based, and this is usually coming through the FAFSA. So make sure you complete your FAFSA as soon as possible. The FAFSA at the graduate level is very similar to the FAFSA at the undergraduate level. It's basically the same thing, except for at the graduate level, you are now considered, once you graduate from your bachelor's, an independent period. So you're not relying on your parents anymore. So you may qualify. You do usually qualify for more loans when it comes to your FAFSA. Just keep in mind the FAFSA, you must be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident and a degree-seeking student. Why do I say this? Because some students may apply for a degree-seeking program, but maybe they're admitted to a non-degree program, which means like the department says, your application looks like it potentially may be good. We want you to take a few courses before, but you won't technically be in our degree program. that does happen, or it could be a conditional admission sort of thing, just make sure if that does happen, keep in mind you may have to find other funds because you would not be eligible for the loans that the FAFSA would make you eligible for. And you should complete the FAFSA even if you hope to be fully funded in graduate school. So some students are like, well, I want an assistantship. I want them to pay for my grad school. I don't need this FAFSA. There's no harm in filling it out. It is free. So fill it out. You never know what kind of funding comes up. And I give the example of the COVID funding that happened. They pulled students' FAFSAs to see who qualified for additional aid throughout the height of COVID. So need-based is one category. The next category are merit-based scholarships, and I think I get into more detail on another slide, and then assistantships and student employment, and I'll talk about that in more detail. And they usually come from two sources. So internal sources, that's internal to the university, which usually looks like maybe some merit scholarships, some assistantships, and external sources. So again, filling out the FAFSA, seeing what loans you qualify for, maybe some employers, and maybe some external fellowships or external funding you can apply for. So let's talk about some graduate assistantships, and what these are called may vary from institution to institution, and what they cover is for sure going to vary from institution and even program to program. So at the University of Albany, what, for example, one program may be able to cover with an assistantship, maybe a full scholarship and a stipend of $20,000, whereas another department may only be able to cover 6 credits out of 9 credits and a partial stipend, so of maybe 13,000. So just keep in mind these can vary even within the same university. Assistantships may be available to both master's and PhD students. I will say a lot of these tend to be reserved for PhD students, especially the research assistantships and the teaching assistantships. That said, I had a teaching assistantship getting my master's, so it's not impossible to be funded as a master's student. Typically, it will include, like I said, a stipend, maybe a tuition scholarship or a partial tuition scholarship. It could cover health insurance. I will say at most institutions, I just don't see that it covers like any student fees. So like technology fee or gym fee or whatever it may be. And a research assistantship is what it sounds like. You're helping a professor in a lab doing research. A teaching assistantship is also what it sounds like, but that can also vary. So you may be the instructor of record where you are teaching undergrad courses. You may be assisting a faculty member or another instructor, maybe with doing breakout. It's a large lecture hall and you're doing breakout sessions, or maybe you're helping them grade homeworks, quizzes, and stuff like that. So the job responsibilities that come with that will for sure vary. You'll get an offer letter and it should outline what it would cover. And then graduate assistantships will also vary from program to program, institution to institution, if they're even available. Graduate assistantships usually mean that you're not working within your department, but you're working outside of it. So at the University of Albany, for example, we have a few graduate assistants in the graduate school who help us with recruitment. Some help our director of finance and administration. We have some students in international student scholar services, so in the library. So it really varies, and you're doing more sort of administrative work than really any sort of like research or teaching in your own program. There are also opportunities for diversity award programs. So if you are a student in HEOP, you could qualify for GOP or Carson Carr. That's what we call them at least Carson Carr may vary in name. GOP is usually GOP, Graduate Opportunity Program. And those are usually based on either programs that you're in at the undergraduate level or sort of your demographic. So first generation, low income, diversity, and the names of those and the opportunities that are available are for sure going to vary again from program to program, institution to institution. And how can you locate an assistantship? Most of them will come from the academic department. So we have plenty of students who reach out to the graduate school asking how they can be fully funded. And we usually point them back to the departments, whether it's physics or MPH program, because it's usually where the funding will come from first. And then outside of that, we have a funding website. So some institutions may have that where you can go to the centralized website. They may have openings available. Handshake, I'm pretty sure, Sienna, you're on Handshake, right? I think a lot of institutions have a Handshake. No, not on Handshake. Okay, I lied. Sorry. sorry, everyone. Handshake. A lot of institutions use Handshake, and it's sort of the system where employers will put opportunities out, and the University of Albany uses that as well to put a lot of assistantships that are available on campus, and other universities may have something similar to that. And then just don't forget, it may require a separate application. So going back to that application, you may have one for the program, for your academic program, but you may also have to fill one out for an assistantship. So make sure you're looking for all of those details, because you don't want to miss out on a funding opportunity just because you missed the application for it.
Thank you so much, Soha, for
You're
that, all that useful information. You always bring us some good stuff. Soha, just for your information, will be in our first breakout room, obviously for you, Albany, if you'd like to join her after we finish our panel. Our second panelist, who we're very happy to welcome tonight, is Mariah Pelagi, who is the Assistant Director of Graduate Admissions at the College of St. Rose. Mariah is a native of Albany, New York, who has enjoyed staying connected to the local community through her current role. She oversees the strategic recruitment of students applying to allied mental health and educational leadership programs, if you are interested in either of those fields. She also serves as a member of St. Rose's CCRT team, developing trainings, education, and awareness surrounding issues on campus involving Title IX. Prior to her current role, Ms. Pelagi served as an assistant director of undergraduate admissions at St. Rose, working with students from New England, Long Island, and Queens. Tonight, she is going to talk with you about resumes and CVs, and also the all-important letters of recommendation. Mariah, welcome.
Thank you. So first, kind of talking about resumes versus CVs. I think most students are typically familiar with a resume. Oftentimes, in high school, you're starting to build your resume. And as you enter, college, you're adding to that. It's really kind of more of a snapshot. So the resume is going to be kind of a shorter form that has experience, education, and skills. Typically at the undergraduate level, you'll have your education kind of first, and then maybe you'll have leadership experiences. So if you're on campus, you might list, if you are a resident assistant or if you are the president of a club, and then skills. So oftentimes students will include technical skills. So knowing how to operate, the office systems, as well as maybe some interpersonal skills, kind of depending on what that resume is for. And depending on what program you're applying to, some programs will require a resume, some programs will require a CV, and some programs also leave it up to you to kind of decide. CVs tend to be more common in, mental health, psychology, that type of field. And that's really more of a comprehensive statement. So whereas a resume is more of, a 1 to 2 page max kind of snapshot, the CV can be, up to like several pages. And that's really kind of going to go through professional qualifications, your education, experience, accomplishments, activities, as well as publications and poster presentations. So kind of on the next slide, it just has like 2 examples. So you can kind of see, on the left, this is a typical, resume. It has your education on top, experience, leadership, and then, honors and awards. As you get further into your career, that experience might be on the top and the education moves down. But then the CV on the right, you can kind of see there's more pieces to that. So kind of education. If you're going for, I'm going to speak from a psychology background because that's what my background is. You might have related coursework. So you might have, a normal psychology or things that will speak to maybe a concentration that you're looking for at the graduate level. And then you also might have projects. So if you have, assisted, a professor with research at the undergraduate level, or if you have, completed a thesis or done a project or a presentation, either, on campus at a research or off campus at different conferences nationally or regionally. A CV is a place really to expand upon that, as well as, some of the things that will be on your resume. But it's kind of more of an opportunity to speak more specifically to the area of study that you're going to, as opposed to just kind of an overview of, what you've been doing all throughout undergrad. And then moving into letters of recommendation, this is kind of one of those things that students are kind of like, who do I ask? What do they need to talk about? Sometimes it can be a little nerve-wracking to know who to approach about letters of recommendation. Really, there's kind of two main people that you would approach. The first is a professor that knows you well. So maybe in one of your upper level classes, or a professor that you've done research with or you've interacted with quite a bit outside of class. Who can speak to your academic and your career goals. Sometimes this might be an academic advisor that you've worked with throughout the years, and they can also speak to your strengths in the classroom. So typically most programs will require at least one letter of recommendation from a professor. And then apart from that, you can always, ask a second professor that you have a relationship with to write that second letter, that third letter, depending on where you're applying, but also a supervisor or a work mentor who can talk about your experience in the field or your work ethic. So, if you've done a part-time job outside of school, or you've gotten an internship experience in your field that you're planning on going to graduate school for, asking a mentor or supervisor that can talk about more of how your character lines up with the field. And so those are kind of going to be the two types of professionals that you would ask. Typically, it's frowned upon to ask a family member or a close family friend to write a letter of recommendation. There certainly are, times in specific circumstances where that would be appropriate, but for the most part, it's going to be a professor or, a supervisor. And then when and how, a good rule of thumb is to give the person that's writing your letter at least a month's notice. So emailing them or speaking with them after class to set up an in-person meeting. And, at this meeting, you can talk about what your career goals are, kind of what's not going to be, on that resume or maybe in that statement of purpose that they can speak to. It also, leaving yourself this much time means that, if you don't feel like it's going to be a good fit, or if they don't feel like they can write, the best recommendation for you at that time, you have some time to approach other individuals as well. So you make sure that, the person, has enough time, and you also have enough time to get everything in the timeline. And then kind of why this is required or why it's important, it really provides those reviewing your application a sense of who you are outside of just numbers on a page or, what you've written on your resume. They can validate and expand on the information that you provide in your personal statement and on your resume. And, they cover your personal qualities and accomplishments that make you stand out from others that are also applying to the programs. Because at the grad level, a lot of programs are very competitive. And they also, can really speak to what attributes they've seen in you that make you a match for the program to which you're applying for. So that's kind of the overview of a letter of recommendation. And then the next slide is really just kind of like a sample of a letter of rec scoring review. So you can certainly kind of, take a glance through this, but kind of very similar to what we were chatting about before. Sometimes it's just nice to kind of see a visual and have some more examples about, what the scoring rubric might be when faculty are reviewing those letters. But that is the end of my section.
Thank you, Mariah. I feel like there's some insider knowledge there with that scoring rubric. I think a lot of our students will appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, our next presenter is Colleen Flynn Tapalia. She is the Senior Director of Graduate Recruitment and Enrollment Marketing at Clarkson University. She worked earlier in her career for the College of St. Rose and the School for International Training. She has also served as Publications Chair on the NAGAP Board, as well as on the association's Education Committee. She edited the third edition of An Essential Guide to Graduate Admissions, published by the Council of Graduate Schools. In addition to Colleen's work in higher education, she has a professional background in intercultural communication and management in international organizations, including service as a Peace Corps volunteer in Burundi and the United Nations volunteer in Nepal. Colleen holds a bachelor's degree from NYU, a master's from Cornell, and she's currently working on a PhD in higher education leadership for changing populations at Notre Dame of Maryland University. Tonight, Colleen will discuss the transcript and its role in the decision-making process, along with addenda to an application. Colleen, welcome once again.
Thank you. And I apologize that my summary of my experience was so long. But I think one thing that comes through is that I know a lot about transcripts. I've worked a lot of places and I've studied at a lot of places. So maybe that gives me a unique perspective on the world of transcripts. And I think everyone understands what a transcript is. All of our participants today had to produce a high school transcript in order to enter college. And so it won't come as any great surprise that an undergraduate transcript is needed in order to apply for graduate study. Your transcript, pardon me, will show all of the courses that you've attempted. Typically, they also include withdrawals on any repeated courses. Sometimes the repeated courses drop out of the GPA calculation, which is fabulous if you've had to repeat a course. Also, transfer credit will be indicated on a transcript. And academic work that you've done at different levels will usually appear on different transcripts from the same institution. So if you studied at St. Rose with Mariah, then you would get a transcript from the bachelor's level and the master's level when you apply to Clarkson to come and get your PhD, for example. Some other facts about transcripts. Many universities will accept scanned copies of your transcript for graduate admission purposes, and you only need to provide the official transcript at the point that you're actually going to enroll. That's the case at Clarkson, and I know that we're not alone with that. But an official transcript at some point will be required, and it's important to know the difference between an official transcript and an original transcript. An original transcript is just a document issued by an institution. But at the point that it comes out of its beautiful envelope, it is no longer official. And typically this is more of a concern for international students than domestic US students, but an official transcript is one that is issued by an institution and only opened when it is received by the target institution. More recently, of course, we have electronic transcripts, and those are transmitted by an email link, and then the admission office at the university you're applying to will click on the link and it will be official because it's come electronically in that way. The paper copies will come usually on some kind of colored paper, usually the color of your school official colors. Like my NYU transcripts are purple, for example, and it'll have an embossed or raised seal as well as the date of issuance and a registrar's signature. And again, it's official as long as the envelope has not been opened. On our next slide, I've just got an example of what a transcript looks like. They're basically all very similar, but what is it that the admission committee is looking for? That's the part that students typically don't understand. So you know that you have to send this transcript. The most important thing is to have the best possible grades that you can. Where you are in your studies now determines how much control over that you have. But once the transcript is complete, the faculty on the committee that is making an admission decision will look at your GPA, both overall and in the major. Sometimes students want to hear the answer that they only care about grades in the major, but really faculty are going to look at both to make sure that you're a well-rounded individual. The second thing that they'll look at is trends, upward trend or downward trend. So it's preferable to be on an upward trend over time, that as you go deeper into your content area of the major, you are more motivated and apply yourself more and more diligently to earn those higher level grades. I'll talk about downward in just a minute because that happens too, and there are good reasons that it happens. Many faculty believe that there are particular classes that are indicative of a student's ability at the graduate level. So if you're going to study computer science, for example, they're going to want to see how you did in particular programming languages. They may care how you did in data structures. They may think that there are certain math classes that indicate potential for success at the graduate level. You won't always know what those classes are as an applicant, but that is the kind of thing that they're looking for. And they'll look similarly at changes in major. If you're, again, that computer science aspirant for postgraduate study, maybe you started out as a astrophysics major, and that just wasn't a good fit for you, but you loved your computer science classes and eventually changed majors. The faculty are going to look at that transcript and see, oh, yes, there was a big shift in this student's performance when the major aligned better with the student's interests. So they do look at changes in major. And finally, at the end, they look for things that are maybe a little out of the ordinary, gaps in your studies. Did you take a year and a half off at some point? What was that all about? Did you withdraw from a class? Did you withdraw from that class more than once? That would be maybe a little red flag for the faculty. Were there repeated classes? Is there a pattern among those repeated classes? And finally, is there one semester that's just a bad semester on your transcript? And this last bullet point really takes us to my next topic, which is creating an addendum to your application. You might want to include an addendum if any of those last things that were on my final bullet on the previous slide are the case in your situation. In that case, it's probably important to tell the committee what really was going on. Don't leave it up to them to kind of imagine what happened to you or what was going on in your life. So things to consider are, were there outside forces beyond your control that impacted your undergraduate studies? And for most of you, COVID is going to be one of those things, right? You're at an institution that managed COVID fairly well, but many of your fellow undergraduate students at other institutions, they may not have handled it as well. And so the students' performance might have suffered. And then are those outside forces likely to be relevant to your success as a graduate student? So in that case, you might want to provide something in writing, right? That's the addendum. Many application systems will allow you to upload a miscellaneous document, and that's a good place to put your addendum. You don't want to make it part of your statement of purpose, which we'll talk more about, right? But your statement of purpose is really an articulation of your goals for graduate study. You don't want to muddy the waters with stories about a bad semester in the past. So if possible, and when you want to do an addendum, make it a separate document. But if you're applying in a system where there is no mechanism to add a separate miscellaneous document, my advice would be to add a page at the end of your statement of purpose with space between the end of your statement and a very clear subject line of addendum where you explain what happened in that bad semester. Was there a death in the family? Did you have some other kind of health or mental health issue that you had to deal with? Don't share more than you need to share about your personal stuff. Share as much as you need to share to make it clear to people what happened, but what they want to know essentially is a redemption story. How did you come back from that? What did you learn about yourself that you will take forward into your graduate studies to ensure success at the graduate level? So as I said, if there's no mechanism to add the addendum, either put it as a separate page within the statement of purpose or as a separate page within the resume. The committee will see those things. They're going to read both of those things. And so the addendum would be present and clear for them to look at. I also would advise talking with your Career Center resources to get some help with formulating that addendum so that you don't inadvertently overshare or that you're not so abstract that it's not really clear what it is you're trying to say. So get some help with making sure that you frame it very clearly and with a positive ending to it. So there you go.
Thank you, Colleen. Excellent advice. And remember that Colleen will be available in a breakout room if you have additional questions. We know many students are concerned about the topic of transcripts and addenda, so please feel free to join her breakout room. All right, next we're going to move on to Dr. Susie Berry, who is our representative from AMC from Albany Medical College. Dr. Berry is a California native. She studied biochemistry at California State University, Fullerton as an undergrad and attended medical school at the University of New England College of Osteopathic Medicine in Maine. She did her residency at Bay State Medical Center in Springfield, Massachusetts, a fellowship in pediatric critical care at Al DuPont Hospital for Children in Newark, Delaware. And her current position is as an assistant professor of pediatrics and an associate pediatric for the residency program for the director of Albany Med. And Susie, I apologize so much for butchering that last bullet point and your excellent qualifications.
Oh, no, thank you.
Tonight, Susie will be speaking to us about test scores and the all-important interview process. Thank you, Susie.
No problem. Test scores, everyone hates these standardized tests. No, really, they're not fun at all. Unfortunately, they are a necessary part of the application. And it's really just to see that people are ready for the rigors of advanced study. And I think kind of tying onto the back of the transcript discussion, after reviewing many transcripts over time, it can be confusing as someone looking at those, depending on the school, and the scoring and the grading systems can be variable from school to school. So the part of the aim of this is also, it's hard to benchmark one against the other, to look at a standardized test amongst all students to try to even the playing field of like what you're looking at, to make sure that all students that maybe haven't been provided opportunities as same as other students are kind of like have the same opportunity when we look at test scores to show their academic merit. So they're important from that standpoint. And there's different types of tests depending on what type of program you're looking at for graduate education. I would say that I would love to say that we are really trying, at least in medical education, we're really trying to go more towards a holistic review of applications and looking at the person and looking at what they've done to get to this point. And as Colleen said, like with addendas, looking at redemption stories and examples of grit and perseverance and dedication to moving towards whatever the graduate program you want to do is. But unfortunately, it's still an easy filter when you get thousands of applications to use test scores to find a core pool to start for the review process. And I know some schools for especially like master's PhD programs have certain GRE score cutoffs or averages that they tend to accept. So if you have specific programs in mind, it would be good to do some research to look into that and see what types of scores they're looking for, just to prepare yourself. So for master's and PhD programs, occasionally in law schools, at least from what I looked up, but correct me if I'm wrong if that's still the case, but the GRE, the graduate record examination, would be a test, the test that you would take. For business school, it's going to be the GMAT, the LSAT for law school, and the MCAT for medical school. So I think the most, one of the really important things is to try to set yourself up for success to take this test one time. So you can go through these, and I also put the cost of each test, because having taken many tests throughout the course of medical school, they just get more and more expensive the more you go. And you want to just have to pay for them once, ideally, and get the score that you want. So use that as just somewhat just for your own knowledge, but sometimes it's a motivator just for good preparation. Be very mindful of how you prepare for this and set yourself up as if this is your part of your job. I encourage students, at least from my residency program that I guide for our board review programs for their certifying examinations when they become board certified, to create an actual schedule with set times and actually tease out before you even sit down to study, set content that you're going to study at those times. So you can have, that focus time set aside with focused content, and you don't sit down and waste that time trying to figure out what you should look at. And that you also know, you don't procrastinate. This is your time. That's the time you use. You don't think, oh, well, I can get this done later. I have plenty of time in my day. And then you realize you haven't studied all day. So do some pre-planning as you look towards these exams to put that time and that content into a very specific schedule. The GRE is a couple of different tests. There's the general test, which is what most schools are looking for, just looking at various, reasoning types of tests for higher level of thinking and graduate education. But if you're looking at a focused program, mostly in chemistry, math, physics, psychology, you could also take subject tests just to further highlight your expertise in those areas for the more specific programs. And some other schools look at the requirements of each individual program you're applying to. So you don't want to get surprised that you get this full application in and they ask for your scores and you're trying to cram within the timeline or the deadline of the application for the test to get that test done. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the GRE is good for 10 years in a lot of programs, is at least the experience.
5.
5.
5.
In
Okay.
law school, it's 5 for us.
5. Okay. It's going from my husband's experience for his master's program. So, and this test is about $220. And these are I just looked those up last night just to be sure to update them. The GMAT is for business school. Really just straightforward as far as you're looking at MBA programs, and that's about similar, $250. The LSAT for law school admissions, and really again, and I think at least from MCAT to LSAT, I think these are both really big exams as far as really weighted heavily on your application. And again, I think mostly because it is an easy filter and trying to even the playing field for students and being ready for the rigors of that type of professional education. I know for both those professional programs, there are a lot of exams, even after the entrance exams, that are required to then, certify for your profession. So test taking ability is also an important part for programs to see that you're going to be successful in actually achieving that professional certification, which for the programs themselves later on is going to be a marker of success of the program. So, they're looking for people with good test taking ability. And that being said, please use all your resources. Go to career centers, look for, you don't have to do private tutors necessarily, but a lot of graduate programs, various campuses actually have relationships with professional tutors and people who will get you set up and do testing even to see what your learning styles are and help you through that process. So look for those resources if test taking has been a difficulty for you in the past. But there's a lot of free online resources as well. And the LSAT is about $215 every time you take it. MCAT, I think seems like anything in medicine, it's definitely more expensive than everything else. I don't know, $100 more, so about $315 to take the test. Again, this is a big stressor for anyone looking towards medical school, but preparation is really it. This just tests the base knowledge that you get in any science undergrad. Again, for medical school, we're really trying to look more holistically, so looking at various backgrounds, not just science-based programs for people looking to be in medicine. So, but it has a lot of basic science knowledge as well that you're going to have to know. And there's, again, resources, but also courses to help you with that, as there are for any of these standardized exams. So register early, know where you're going to take it. There's electronic test taking sites, for metrics being the most well-known one throughout the areas, and you go sit in the room for however long, 3 to 4 hours for GRE, GMAT, and LSAT. And again, medicine, everything's more expensive and just drawn out painfully. So looks like about 7.5 hours for the MCAT. And some of this is based on the speed of your test taking ability for getting through these questions. But I'll reiterate this, just to make a study plan and stick to it. Knowing your time you have set aside and the content that you're going to use during that time is going to make things more efficient. It's going to make you less frustrated when you sit down to study, but work with a buddy, and again, use your resources at your school and wherever else you can find them. Interviews. I think interviews are exciting because this is the time when they've looked at your application and want to know more about you. So there's a time to highlight merits from your application and show yourself, right? We want to have people that we think fit in well with our programs. So we've looked at your credentials and we've decided that your credentials are enough to potentially get you into a program, but like personality wise and drive, people really want to know if you're going to be ready for their program. So really be professional. I say in dress, in language, demeanor, setup. I've seen a variety of setups of very interesting to very planned out settings as I've interviewed people, especially on the virtual platform. So just give some forethought to it. I would say be yourself, but remember you're being evaluated. I've notably had situations where there's been perhaps a medical student interviewing for a residency position and I've worked with the medical students, so I've gotten to know them one-on-one. And during the interview, they become very relaxed and talk to me, like a buddy, rather than using it as a way to show that they are here as a professional. So if it's someone you know, that's okay. But I would still say, even, if it feels awkward, be very professional in that instance, because this is the time to show that you're going to this higher level of graduate education or professional program to be a professional. So try not to be too lax, but be yourself. So usually when you set yourself up in the right setting, professional dress, sit up straight, speak clearly, that's going to come through easily and you can still show them who you are. It's better to ask thoughtful questions than to flatter. I think I've definitely it's easy if you can get someone to talk about themselves. The interview tends to go fast and people tend to like talking about themselves, but don't, and it's definitely good to do your background work. If you're speaking to somebody and that if you get a schedule ahead of time and you know who you're speaking to, it is good to really go through and look at whatever content you can get from websites, et cetera, to understand who the person is, perhaps their research interests, things like that, really to speak content and your interests and ask thoughtful questions. But like I said, try not to do it just to flatter. I think it's more interesting to everybody if you seem interested in the content. Again, research the institution and the program to which you're applying. Try not to ask questions necessarily that are easily found on the website, because it could look like you maybe didn't do the research looking through the site to things that are easily gathered from there, but maybe ask some more in-depth questions like, hey, I looked at your site and I saw that you have these, various programs. This one seems very interesting. Could you tell me more about that? So it shows you've done your homework, but it also gives you deeper information about something that really might serve you for their specific program. So as you do that research, try to prepare a list of questions, because you don't want awkward pauses and silences where a lot of times, and I try not to do it to people, it's really hard to say, like, do you have any questions? Because the interviewer might have run out of questions. And if you don't have any questions, it can get a little awkward. So just try to have a list ready. You don't have to go through them all. They could be simple, they could be very detailed. But try to stay positive as well. It's hard to, you're trying, the program has looked at your application and decided you have, again, the merits for their program and want to get to know you, but don't try to tease out things that maybe you've heard that are negative and might make it look like you have a bad taste for the school, or you're kind of being judgmental as far as the program. It's like, oh, I hear you're a big party school. Is that a big problem on campus? And that might be something to get from elsewhere on a peer-to-peer level. But during the interview process, try to stay positive. Be prepared to talk about yourself. Again, it's nice if you can get people to talk about themselves, but be prepared to sell yourself. This is extremely difficult, at least for me. But think of experiences that you're really, really proud of. And again, like Colleen said, like those redemption stories and things where you're like, hey, I really showed a lot of grit. You know, I had this really bad semester, but let me tell you about it. And let me tell you about when this happened. I had a student that it was a remarkable story when I got down to it. It was nowhere else in our application we interviewed, had taken a semester off to help like get her father out of, out of Colombia where they were from, and it was having some dangerous issues. Sorry, my computer just shut down. So be prepared to sell a story that you're proud of. And if you don't have any specific stories, that's fine. Just I think one of the biggest things is review your own application ahead of time. I've asked people about specific things on their application that seemed interested, and they floundered a little bit on talking about it. So especially in the academic projects, if you were a co-author on an academic product, say, and maybe you weren't the main person that wrote the paper or put the project together, review that project and understand what it was about and what it helped achieve. Because if someone asks you about that and you aren't really sure, it just looks bad. So really review your application, know what you put on there, be able to talk about it, and sell your motivation. You can relate this to your personal statement and reiterate some of the points, but they have that content and can read it. So be yourself and be genuine as much as possible. There are definitely questions in interviews that are not supposed to be asked that could be bias, introduce bias into the decision-making process of who gets into the programs. It's very uncomfortable and difficult. I know as someone who's gone through graduate education with children, I've been asked if I've had children, how I plan to, accommodate childcare, if I plan to have more children. And there's questions like you're really not supposed to ask, but really anything along the lines of all of these listed here are things that you can sidestep politely. You don't have to answer them, and you could just, try to politely sidestep the questions. I'd prefer not to answer those questions at the moment, but, maybe launch into some of those questions that you've prepared to try to sidestep that. If they push you on it, that maybe is a red flag for the program or whatnot. If you feel like it's something you've just gotten into a relaxed conversation with somebody and you feel comfortable answering it, that's fine as well. And follow up, I think it's nice. I've gotten follow-up emails, follow-up cards, but follow up in a tactful manner. A simple email or a handwritten card, anything like that can be time consuming, but it's a nice touch, and it kind of brings your name to the forefront of people's minds as they're looking through all the various applicants. Things start to run together after you've looked at hundreds of people, but you may be like, oh, I remember that name because they sent me a really nice card, or they sent me a really nice email to thank me for my time. It doesn't have to be anything much. Usually they're like one-liners. The nice, good ones are really like one-liners of, I really enjoyed our conversation about this. I appreciate you taking the time to speak to me. I very much enjoyed your program. Best of luck in the recruitment process. Something as simple as that.
Thank you, Dr. Berry, for that wealth of information. As always, it's appreciated. We're going to move on now to our final presenter, who is our representative from Albany Law School. We're welcoming Persia Wilkins to our panel tonight. She is the Associate Director of JD and LLM Admissions at Albany Law. She is a native of Jamaica, West Indies, and earned both her undergraduate and graduate degrees in economics and business administration from the University at Albany School of Business. Wilkins works alongside the Assistant Dean of Admissions and the Admissions Review Committee to shape and develop a competitive and inclusive student body. Prior to this role, Ms. Wilkins served as Albany Law School's first director of the Diversity Affairs Office and has worked in higher education in different professional roles for over 2 decades. This evening, Ms. Wilkins will speak to us about the application essay or statement of purpose and how to communicate professionally with your admissions staff.
Good afternoon, everyone. What a great panel. I think everything that my colleagues have talked about today just reminds me of one of my many roles in higher ed when I was assistant director of Albany Law School's Career and Professional Development Office. And everything that we touched on today, and I always say this to students who are thinking about law school, your dream job comes up and you're applying. How do you conduct yourself? And that's what we touched on today, right? We touched on the process, building your application, conducting yourself in a professional way, explaining challenges and hiccups in your life. And it reminds you that we are not looking for perfect people because we're not perfect, right? We're simply advocates for your application. And that's how I see myself. And whenever I do panels and I talk to students in person, I said, listen, I'm an advocate for your application. Give me something that I can fight for you, right? I'm also the advocate for everyone's application. So definitely, highlight some of the things that make you unique. Tell us something unique about you. Tell us why you're choosing our law school. There are 200 plus law schools. There's so many different graduate programs, but you're probably going to apply to 5 schools. So we already know that you have a serious interest, that you've done your research, that you've navigated the process, that you've narrowed your search, that we may fall into the REACH school, the school you think you're going to get into right away, and that school that's a long shot. That's usually where you should really narrow your process. So purpose, the statement of purpose. This is we call it our personal statement in the law school process. We require, please pay attention to the instructions from each school. For our law school, we say 2 to 3 pages, double spaced. I've seen applications where I receive 3 pages, single space, and that's a sign that just pay attention to instructions. Okay, those are important pieces that shows your attention to detail. We also, why this law school? Another thing I wanted to touch on, each graduate law school, medical school, our websites are created for the prospective student. So I'm actually the editor of Albany Law School Admissions Office, the JD Admissions Office website. So I'm constantly massaging it, giving tips, how to build a strong application. We have a link on our website that says that. We go through all the prerequisites of the materials required, and we give you tips on what should be included in these documents. And I believe I looked at all my colleagues' website, and it's the same. So do spend a lot of time on our website. We created it with you in mind. And there are times when we've missed something. And that's when you reach out to our offices and ask those questions, we will add it to our FAQs and make some edits. So please pay deep attention to that. When you're writing your statement of purpose, this is a story about you. Think about the cover letter that you would write to your dream job. 10 years after graduating from graduate school, your dream job comes up and you're writing a personal statement. You're writing a cover letter and you're applying. Think about it also. It's your dream job and you have a deadline date of 2 weeks from today. When do you apply? You apply today, right? Or you apply tomorrow if you can have someone proofread it. But it's going to be that opportunity for you to shine. You're going to talk about why this profession is in your path, what led you here, why this college or this grad school, this grad program, this medical school is in your path, and clearly your major will shine a light on that. But you can also talk about what makes this school unique. Don't forget that you're making the choice to apply to the school. You're in charge. Right? I think a lot of times you guys put a lot of pressure, you assume that we're in charge, but we're one of 200 plus law schools and you're one unique person. So don't ever forget who you are, okay? when you're building your application. We have a tremendous amount of real estate, I call it, which is materials from you. We have an application form, we have your transcripts, we have your resumes, we have your letters of recommendation. So this is a really unique document. It should be brief. It should not cover things that we can find in the rest of your application. And I think it's this window for you to tell us something unique that allows you to stand out compared to other applicants. Let me see. I think I covered a lot of the pieces earlier in my earlier presentation. I think my colleagues have touched on a lot of the pieces that we've talked about that are noted here. Just be positive, be uplifting, tell us how we can help you hone your skills. I think sometimes people miss that. You know, we're looking for those windows and there those pockets of details that kind of walks us through, and I'm constantly looking for that. When I see it in an application, it shows me maturity, it shows me professionalism and confidence. And that's the person I'm constantly looking for, that person to build a class. Just remember, they're usually a full class. We build them one at a time. And also remember that, you know, our acceptance rate is not our enrollment rate. And I can't tell you how many people get confused by that at times. When they see our fact sheet of the incoming class and they see 1,300 applications and they saw that 200 enrolled. We as graduate schools and PhD programs, we don't tend to publicize our acceptance rate unless you have a conversation like this. Albany Law School accepted over 600 folks last year to build a class of 200. How would you know that? We're talking to you right now to let you know that it's not that, it's not, you know, clearly it's a competitive group, but it's a process that happens from the beginning of the cycle to the bitter end, sometimes the day before orientation, right? So there's always clearly you want to apply as soon as possible, but pay attention to those dates, the deadline dates, also the priority deadline dates, and then the official deadline dates, and just work within those lines. Email communication. In addition to your application, don't forget that every time you communicate with us via note card, email, thank you note, a phone call, that this will be logged into your contact area on your application. And we do pay attention to those when we're reviewing applications to see where we met you, how much contact you've had. It's yet another writing sample. So be mindful of that when you're crafting brief emails or when you're rushing, slow it down. It's better to just same with the addenda. You really want to always remember that these are writing samples. Will be one other piece that the review committee will pay attention to. So professional language, great format, no shortcuts. I know sometimes with texting and an email and fast language that sometimes people forget. Another piece too is when you phone our office or you reach out to us through our main admissions line, just be mindful those emails are also attached to your applications. Just remember that students, current law students or current medical students or current pharmacy students or grad students may answer the phone. Just be very professional when communicating with them, because that information is often passed back to us. And those are windows where it can make or break your application if you're unprofessional. Because that's not the type of person we'd want in our space. And our students who work in our front office and our staff who works in our front office, be it a secretary, a coordinator, or a director, or a dean, just be very professional when communicating at all times. You're building your professional background in your professional life, and it starts today. So you just always have to remember that. communication tips. Let me just go over a couple here. Some reasons to reach out to a faculty member when building your application. These are windows. Don't forget your faculty members can also proofread certain documents for you. So use your faculty in a way that helps you as you build your application. Another thing too, faculty members may be a great resource. If they attended a college or a grad school that you're thinking of applying to, why not reach out to them and have those conversations to get the buzz about who you are ahead of your application, right? And let me just ask about curriculum. This is when you're having those interviews. With law school, such as Albany Law, we do not conduct interviews. I think if you're applying to medical school or graduate programs, as you prepare for those in-person meetings, just be mindful and just be thoughtful in terms of how you plan your day. If you don't have a question after, it's okay to just keep moving forward. Maybe go on your campus tour or something else. You don't have to force it or create a question out of something that can be easily found on the website.
Thank you, Persha. Your thoughts are much appreciated in this area. Before we move into the question and answer portion of our panel tonight in our breakout rooms, both Christy Luer and I want to remind you that our centers and offices are very much here to support you through this application process. If you've not visited the Career and Internship Center, had your resume and cover letter certified, please know that they are available in Foy Hall 203 to help you. Their contact information is listed here. And of course, the Writing Center is always available to you. We've seen multiple students just over the past week working on statements of purpose. We are more than happy to help you use these resources. They're free, they're available to you, and we are happy to walk you through the admissions process.
And I'll just chime in one other thing, if I may, and on our website is what we call our career guide. And it is an entirety booklet of everything: resumes, CVs, interviewing, and a whole grad school chapter, which kind of summarizes a lot of what you heard tonight. So if you have questions, that's another great resource to utilize.
And I should add, Christy, I'm sure you have copies of that in your office.
Mhm.
You were kind enough to deliver copies to the Writing Center as well. So if you'd like to pick up one of those career guides, it's a wonderful resource. Please stop by either Foy or the Writing Center in the Standish Library.
And I also wanted to add that because of COVID, we've done a lot of virtual information sessions. And Albany Law School's website, if you type in information sessions, you will see our Career Center half-hour talk on jobs if you're interested in applying. We have financial aid half-hour where you can RSVP and they're live. We even have information sessions on creating a strong law school application. And our Justice Center also has a half-hour. So, you know, most schools do have information sessions. So this is not the one window that you have. And we also take phone appointments. So, you know, those are opportunities to kind of address any questions you have privately that you may not want to share in group.
Are there any questions? I think we're at that point. Are there any questions from the students for the panel at large? And then we will also have the opportunity to go into breakout rooms. But if there's any general questions, that would be great for the panel itself. There was one sent in earlier that I will just ask. And I think it's just more reassurance. Maybe they sent it before Colleen went into her whole piece, but you know, how much should they worry about like one bad semester? So we'll start with that question and send any others.
Well, I'll go ahead since I talked a little bit about that before. I don't think one bad semester is tragic determinative of how the outcome is going to be of an application. If you are applying just after graduation, you'll have shown that you could complete the bachelor's degree. And that's one of the most important things that you can do, is to show that you finish what you start. And then just a short statement indicating in very general terms what happened and how you overcame it. And perhaps just a sentence or two about what that has taught you about how to complete those things that you start and make good on your commitments.
Perfect. That's exactly what we want to say. Take ownership, show us how you grow, and show us an uptrend in grades next semester. And we'll figure a lot of grace. We grant a lot of grace in admissions reveal, and that would be one.
Are there any other questions? They were so thorough that we addressed all the questions prior to. All right, go ahead, Anne.
Okay, everyone, so it's time to move into breakout rooms if you're interested. If you listed a preference on your registration form, we've set you up with your breakout room automatically, but you are always welcome to come back into the main room if you'd like to join multiple breakout rooms. Soha from the University of Albany will be in room 1. Christy, I believe, will be representing the College of St. Rose in room 2. Colleen, representing Clarkson, will be in room 3. Dr. Barry will be in room 4. And Persha Wilkins from Albany Law will be in room 5. And if any of you did not pre-choose your room, please just stay in large group and we'll move you to where you need to go.
And because we probably won't come back together as an entire group, I just want to say thank you to our panelists. Great information, very insightful and very, very helpful. So thank you all for taking time out of your busy days and travel schedule